Welcome to the Pharmacy Podcast Show. You're listening to the first and only podcast dedicated to the business of pharmacy. You can find all of our episodes at pharmacypodcast.com.
Welcome to the Pharmacy Podcast. I'm your co-host in 2017, focused on your career development, Erin Albert. More on me over at my website, erinalbert.com, or let's connect via Twitter. My handle is at Erin L. Albert, or of course you can connect with us at Pharmacy Podcast. Today, we continue our growing mini-series, I guess it's not so mini anymore, about Back to School RX, or graduate school considerations for the pharmacist already in practice. Today's guest just wrote a brand new book that I am super excited about. The title of the book is called Entrepreneurs in Pharmacy and Other Leaders. And why I'm excited about this book is ACPE's 2016 guidelines and the fact that schools of pharmacy really should be focused on teaching things like entrepreneurship and leadership, self-awareness, etc. So this is a great resource, not only for schools of pharmacy, but for pharmacists out there really looking to take their careers in a new and exciting direction. Let me tell you a little bit about George. George Zorich is a retired healthcare executive and graduate of the University of Wisconsin School of Pharmacy. In retirement, he has directed his energy to writing about healthcare topics he feels passionate about, working on healthcare corporate boards, nonprofit boards, mentoring high school kids that need a few breaks, and staying involved with his alma mater, whether at the School of Pharmacy or attending football and basketball games and cheering on the University of Wisconsin Badgers. I met George through this book project of his, and I think the conversation will be super helpful in terms of the outcomes related to graduate school in developing leaders and or entrepreneurs. So give a listen to today's episode. Mr. George Zorich, the author of the brand new book, Entrepreneurs in Pharmacy and Other Leaders. George, welcome to the Pharmacy Podcast.
Well, thank you, Erin. Glad to be here.
We're so excited to have you. And actually, it was so timely that your book was released while we're working on this Back to School RX idea around going back to grad school as pharmacists. But we'll get into all of that here in a moment. I love to start with the same question for all of our guests, and that question is, how did you get to where you are today?
So a little summary of kind of the whole beginning to end in 2 minutes or less?
Yep.
Is that the idea?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Well, I can do that. I guess the first part would have to be at least focusing on my parents. They constantly were telling us about the value of college, and especially my mother, and so they had not gone to college. My sister and I were first generation college graduates. And I think part of it was she had always wanted to go to college, but the Depression got in the way in the 1930s.
Okay.
And so she had to work right out of school to provide some money for her mother and the younger siblings. And I think it always was an important factor to her. And she definitely wasn't going to she was going to make sure her children went to college because she saw that as being the road to opportunities.
Okay.
So that was instilled in us quite a bit. And so as a kid, I was always interested in chemistry. And so a science major would have made sense at college. And when I got there, I kind of bounced around a little bit with a few majors, but I ended up in microbiology. And I was, kind of moving along in micro, and a professor came up to me one day and said, "Are you thinking about the graduate track in the master's and PhD program?" And I said, "No, not really. I've never really thought of it that way." And he said, "Well, you can't do much with an undergraduate degree in micro, and the doctorate path might be your answer." And I immediately thought, am I really going to be able to stand the smell of this laboratory with all the agar and the fermentation things going on for this many years? And I think he saw that I was pretty perplexed, and he said, "Well, before I came back for my PhD, I had a pharmacy degree, and I know some people over at the School of Pharmacy. I would gladly introduce you if you'd like." So to make a long story short, I ended up applying there, and I was on a waiting list. based on my stellar grades, but I eventually got in.
Awesome.
Which I will say, a couple of the entrepreneurs in the book were also the last ones to get into the School of Pharmacy. Which I think really points, Aaron, to the fact that maybe we need to relook at the admission criteria, at least tweak it a little bit.
I am not opposed to that idea. And in fact, the joke is it's not Pharma A, it's not Pharma B, it's Pharmacy for a reason.
Okay, I've never heard that, actually. Yeah. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
So actually a funny story was when I was in pharmacy school, we had a jurisprudence professor named Doc Hamill, who was an ex-Navy guy, so very regimented. And he did a little survey every year on 3x5 cards. And it was about our preference after college. So the options were retail, hospital, and graduate school. And I filled in sales, Eli Lilly and Company, and created my own topic or a little category there. And when he read the results, he actually mentioned the breakdown, of how many were going into hospital, how many in retail, how many at graduate school. But then he also said, and even one person is saying that they will go to work in the pharma industry as a sales rep. What a waste of a pharmacy degree. So right about that time, I'm pretty much slouching in my back row chair and, probably had a nervous laugh or two, while he made the comment. But I thought this sounded like the beginning of a great career in my eyes. But to my professors in pharmacy school, and at least at that time, they seemed to stress a much more limited role for the degree. You could either go the traditional route or be scorned in some way.
Well, that's why
ahead.
I absolutely love that you've written this book, George, because I think to this day, a lot of pharmacy schools are still playing those same three cards. So retail, hospital, or in the third bucket is usually like a residency or a fellowship.
Yeah, exactly. I agree with that. And the idea for the book, obviously ACP was a factor in it. But I also wanted all the students to know, and eventually the faculty to start espousing this, and that is, you can do anything with this degree. It's a fantastic degree. Let's not limit it to retail pharmacy, hospital, or graduate school / residency.
Yeah, so let's get into a little more detail about the actual book. Again, the title is Entrepreneurs in Pharmacy and Other Leaders. So beyond what you've just described, why did you write this book? What do you hope to get out of it?
Well, I think there were two reasons, mainly. One, I don't think we are teaching students enough about some real basics in education. So to me, and you'll hear me say this at a high school level also, but I say it at the college all the time. We need more critical thinking, more leadership being taught, more communication, more presentation skills, and yes, even entrepreneurship. And I think too often our faculty will say, well, we expect that to get taught during the APPEs or by the preceptors. And to me, it sounded like we were just passing the buck too much. I thought they felt very strongly about teaching clinical pharmacy practice, but not as strong about teaching some of these other factors that I think are really important for kids to succeed in life, and definitely for college graduates. I think you need this to succeed in life. You need communication skills and presentation skills, and you definitely wouldn't hurt by learning about entrepreneurship.
Completely agree. And for those who aren't as familiar out there with ACPE, the standards kind of were updated by which pharmacy schools were mandated to teach. And one of the new standards is, in fact, this idea of leadership, entrepreneurial thinking, and behavior as part of the new standard. So again, I applaud you, George, for putting this book together, because there's not a lot of resources out there for entrepreneurial educators in pharmacy. So,
and I can only hope it's used as a tool going forward by some of the faculty, and I think it will be incorporated sometime in the next year.
Yeah, I'm excited about that. So what did you learn? I always say that books are really journeys for the author. So when you were going on this journey of putting this book together, what did you learn?
Well, I think definitely one thing was it validated what I think I already felt, and that was how many great things you could do with a pharmacy degree. And if you look at the leaders section of the book, I was amazed at really the breadth of all these jobs that you can get, all these careers you can get starting with a pharmacy degree. And I also learned, though, that just about everyone does start in a traditional route. I mean, most people are starting in retail, hospital, or a residency. But the important thing is that they should understand that can be their starting point, but it doesn't have to be their end point. The other thing in writing the book was the sheer dedication I saw in the entrepreneurs in starting and growing a new business. And it just made me realize how important entrepreneurs are to the economic engine and the economic growth of the United States economy. So I think we all benefit when entrepreneurs are doing their thing, and we can nurture more entrepreneurs in the future. Simple as that.
Yeah, and your book is broken between entrepreneurs and leaders, but you have significantly more leaders than you do entrepreneurs. Did you kind of face some challenges in identifying and finding more entrepreneurs, or as you went along, you just discovered and wanted to kind of highlight the variety of career backgrounds, or was it a combination thereof?
Well, I think that's really a good point. The leaders, I think, are going to be more common. And I think part of that, Aaron, is that leaders are typically people who are working somewhere. And entrepreneurs are people that have started up something and created something. So I look at that, and I think I just had more to choose from.
Okay.
There are quite a few pharmacists out there that have, I would say multiple degrees, and I think it's important for them as leaders to go that route. And part of it is, I think if I look at it closely, part of it is that those degrees are needed to advance in a corporation. An entrepreneur's not going to feel that same way because they simply want to build their business. They don't care if they get an MBA or they're taking additional courses as a master's in public health or anything else. They just simply want to build their business. So what they might do is just take a course, or they might get an introduction to something that'll help them build their business.
Yeah, and you've got several professionals highlighted in this book that have been on the podcast. Joe Ranazizi is one perfect example of that, formerly of at DEA. Katasha Butler is actually part of this series as well on Back to School RX. So how did you go about finding all these professionals to be a part of this project?
Well, it started this way. When I first was at the Board of Visitors meeting at the University of Wisconsin, we talked about the ACPE guidelines that we were hearing about, and we said, well, what are we going to do about it? So I turned to our dean and I asked him, and he discussed it for a little bit, and I thought, well, I've got an idea. Why don't I write a letter and you send it out to the top 25 schools of pharmacy, to their deans, because you know them. And I want you to ask a question, and it's a simple one. When you think entrepreneur in your alumni group, who do you think of?
Okay.
And I wanted those suggestions. And so we got those names, and then we interviewed every one of them that we got in. And we had 22 of those. Now, we also got word of mouth, other people that were thought to be entrepreneurs extraordinaire. And so we reached out to them, and I networked and found a way of reaching out to them.
Okay, great.
The leaders, it was a similar thing. In 35 years, after being in the career I've been in, where I've been in big pharma, I've been in distribution models, I've been in the generic business, I've been in startups, and I've been in biotech. The last 15 years, I ran companies for private equity as a president or CEO. So I was used to acquiring companies, building them up, and selling them. I met a lot of people along the way and built up a great network. So when it came to let's find leaders in all sorts of different areas of pharmacy, all of them starting with a pharmacy degree, but moving on to phenomenal careers, there was a great network started, and I simply networked it after that.
And this is not a question that we previously discussed, but it was something that I read in your introduction about what you philosophically believe the difference is between an entrepreneur and the average pharmacist. And correct me if I'm wrong, but you seem to have found that risk is a huge divider, I guess, between the two camps. Is that kind of your experience now, retrospectively looking at all the people that you talk to in pharmacy?
Yeah, definitely. I think it is. And part of it, I think, Aaron, is that pharmacists in general are fairly conservative. So I'm not expecting them to be always being great risk takers. But a subset of pharmacists will be. And they have to be confident. They have to be really, good about their decision making and know that they can make good decisions. And they're willing to have enough confidence to take that risk in life, to jump out on their own, grab that brass ring, and build that business of some sort. So it's got to be a scary feeling. And I don't think, whether it's engineers or nurses or pharmacists or physicians, most of us want a comfort level. And it takes a special breed to go out there and start one's own business. And that's why I always say that if for all the pharmacists that are out there in the world, if 2% do entrepreneurial things, in the next decade, our goal ought to be that we go from 2% to 4% or 2% to 6% in the next 10 years of pharmacists doing entrepreneurial activities, because I think it just benefits society and it solves healthcare problems and employs a lot of people. And entrepreneurs are good at that. And I think they've shown it over time.
Yeah, and I want to go back to a comment you said earlier about the fact that we were joking about Pharma A, Pharma B, Pharma C. In my experience in teaching entrepreneurship to pharmacy majors, I attracted two types of students in that elective. Either kind of the social chairs, I call them, the people with a 3.0 GPA, but they were in every after class activity, they were an officer, they were doing a lot of different things. Or I found that there were some rebels in the class too. Maybe they were struggling with pharmacy. So I'm curious to hear, in your experience serving on various pharmacy boards, schools of pharmacy, is this something that, is entrepreneurship something that we can teach? And does it attract certain types of individuals within pharmacy, in your opinion?
Yeah, it's interesting. And the first one is, can we teach it? I think we can encourage it. We can nurture it. We can give students so many examples that they feel comfortable that they could jump out on their own and start a business. Before I interviewed all these people, Aaron, I would not have known so much of the complexity in some of the businesses that they built. But once I read them, it gave me a little bit more reassurance that I could see where more and more people reading about entrepreneurship would have a little bit more comfort level in starting their own business and taking that leap. Once again, it's not 100% of the pharmacists I'm talking about. Maybe it's 2%. But how do we just get more doing that? And then I always wonder, is part of it a simple DNA thing? Is there just a little bit more risk taking in some people in society? And I'm not sure. What do you think about it?
I had the privilege, like you, of being a first-generation college graduate in my family. However, my parents were entrepreneurs, and I ended up being an accidental entrepreneur myself. So I think, to your point, you can be what you can see. And that's why I love that this book is now available for pharmacy students to start thinking about how wide the bandwidth is now in terms of career options for pharmacy. So I applaud you for that. What do you want the outcomes of this book to be? It's my understanding your proceeds are not going back into George Zorich's, bank account. So what are you hoping to do with the proceeds from this particular book?
Yeah, you're right about that. I mean, I just planned that I would spend a certain amount of money to publish this.
Okay.
Obviously, do all the interviews, and that would be a sunk cost, and 100% of the royalties would therefore then go to good programs, pharmacy foundations, pharmacy programs, and of course anything that was pharmacy related that encouraged entrepreneurship. So that was the main goal. I knew I wasn't going to make any money on it, but when I sat there at that Board of Visitors meeting one day and felt that we really didn't have a good tool going forward, in a moment of probably insanity, I said, I'll do it. Mm-hmm. How hard can it be to write a book? And I think I learned along the way it is challenging and it takes a lot of discipline. So my idea with these royalties, and of course if no books sell, no royalties will occur for any of these programs anyway, so it's a moot point. But my assumption is royalties will occur and these books will sell. And my idea is to have this Shark Tank type of competition starting in, let's say, the fall of 2018 with pharmacy schools that are able and willing to pull the trigger on this. So I would want each school to encourage students, and maybe it's a subset of students, to participate in the competition and develop a solution to a healthcare problem. It might be a business idea or a well-done business plan. Or maybe it could even be an iPhone app. I'm not really sure. And I'm really not sure how elaborate it's going to be in year one, but I know it's going to get better every year. So then each school would have a winner, and I would want that winner to advance. All the winners from the different schools would advance to some forum, such as the ASHP mid-year clinical meeting in December of 2018. And my goal would be that we award scholarships and prizes at that time.
That's great. Yeah, I know NCPA did some pitch programs in the past, but that's another kind of sub-issue within entrepreneurship education, that traditionally the idea of being an entrepreneur in a pharmacy setting meant being a pharmacy owner, like a brick and mortar pharmacy, right? But now I think, reading briefly some of the professionals in your book as entrepreneurs, they're not all owning pharmacies anymore, and they consider themselves entrepreneurs. So I love this book, again, in the idea that entrepreneurship, just in and of itself, there's so much opportunity there, whether you want to be a part-time entrepreneur, full-time, etc. If you want to own a pharmacy or you want to own an app that helps patients with medication adherence or whatever the case may be.
I would like pharmacists to be taught in school and at least have it instilled that their best boss in the future is most likely themselves, and that they should do everything reasonably possible to make that happen.
Yeah, I love that.
Well, you know that very well.
I do. So, George, let's talk back to School RX. You're going to be part of this mini-series. What percentage do you think of the professionals that were in this book, both the leaders as well as the entrepreneurs, had advanced degrees, and what role do you think graduate school might play in becoming either a leader in pharmacy and or an entrepreneur?
Yeah, I think that's really a good question, and it made me think about this a little more, because I think about 1/2 of the leaders got an additional degree and about 1/3 of the entrepreneurs did.
Okay.
So I'm gonna oversimplify something here, but it's in a way reiterating a little bit what I did before. I think an entrepreneur will learn what they need to know. So they might take a class or they'll go online and find the solution. And I think more leaders will get that advanced degree. And I think they need it usually for more corporate stuff, including advancement. And I don't think that entrepreneur cares quite as much about that advancement part. They're just starting to build that business. And the example I'll give is John Gregory, who built a phenomenal business at King, Monarch, and at GIV. And I mean, he sold King for $4 billion to Pfizer. But John Gregory told me a story that he went back to the University of Maryland for some award he was to receive, and a student asked him what his favorite course was in school. And he said his pharmacy accounting class. And I think it surprised the faculty because they were all expecting it to be, medicinal chemistry or pharmacology. And they right away, they said, why? And he said, well, because when he finally started his business, he was able to understand how a P&L worked. And he understood the basics of debits and credits. So when he first went to a bank for a loan in his startup first business where he didn't have a lot of staff and you have to bootstrap a lot of things, he was able to put a proposal in a fashion that the bank understood. So I saw it as John was telling us, hey, I didn't need a Wharton MBA, but I definitely needed pharmacy accounting. And in this case, it was as simple as that. John never did get his MBA, but it probably wouldn't have hurt him to get it. But for an entrepreneur, I don't think it's essential. It's whatever it takes to make the business successful. For leaders, I think it always helps to get that extra education. And those leaders typically work for corporations, and I think it helps them advance in those corporations and provides more resume cachet. But that's just my opinion.
Yeah. But I think to your point and John Gregory's point, pharmacy schools love to focus on pharmacology, med chem, and clinical pharmacy these days. And I am somewhat of a critic of that. I believe that, pharmacy majors at the end of the day are going to work for corporations or even nonprofits, but they have to be sustainable businesses at the end of the day. So that means things like basics of accounting, managing people, communication with employees, and all of those courses seem to be like a lower priority for many pharmacy schools. And I think that is to the detriment of the profession, frankly. So you will not hear any disagreement from me on that because yeah. I've already said that I think you could take this great clinical pharmacy curriculum, and it's fantastic, but instead take 90% of it. And I don't know how you figure it out, but take 90% of it and give the 10% to teaching better business and life skills for the student going forward as they graduate. And it is things like communication and critical thinking and entrepreneurship and things that they actually are going to use in school. I just never used medicinal chemistry. I'm sure I could have had a condensed course less than 1 year that could have gotten me through pharmacy school. And so I agree with you 100%. I'm preaching to the choir.
I don't think it's popular. I don't think it's popular at the faculty level to make that statement. And when I made it at the University of Wisconsin, it was not popular either.
Yeah. So hopefully through projects like your book, Entrepreneurs in Pharmacy and Other Leaders, we're going to show people what you can be. And I think that includes, the ideas and the concepts around clinical pharmacy is great, but that's just one aspect. There's so many others out there as options for pharmacists moving forward with their careers. Now, one other question, George, before we go to our speed round and we learn more about where to get your book. I noticed as well, that I'm big on, gender parity in women. I noticed that you only had about a third of the folks in your book who were women. I was curious to find out, did you, when you were sending out these messages, run across many women entrepreneurs in pharmacy, or do you think it's just a product of kind of the dynamics that we're living in right now where there's just not that many women leaders in healthcare? Well,
let's separate out leaders from entrepreneurs. I think they're the number of female leaders is closer and matches closer to the graduation rate at the schools.
Okay.
And, but it's still probably deficient. But I think I could go to any part of a career path and find equal number of female or male candidates at least. Now, I think what you're telling me is I've overrepresented males in this. Is that part of it?
I don't think it's so much that as it is indicative of kind of the times we're living in. And, I'm a big proponent of getting more women into leadership and entrepreneurship as well, positions. And it just, I don't know. I think women have extra challenges associated with entrepreneurship and or leadership. If you look at the big pharmacy chains, you look at the wholesalers, you look at any big healthcare system, there are so few women at the top that even though pharmacy since the 1980s has had predominantly women enrolled in the coursework, we still don't have enough women leaders overall. And I just wondered if you had kind of noted that as well throughout your journey in putting together this book.
Yeah, I think of the 32 leaders, I think 10 of them or 11 of them are female. And if it matched up what the graduation rate is, it should be more, not 10, but 15 or about 50 plus %. So I think I'm going to make a broad statement here. I think it was easier to find male leaders, not by a lot, but it was probably easier to find male leaders. On the entrepreneur side, 4 of the 12 were female. But I would also say that it was harder to find the female entrepreneurs in pharmacy. Other than women that owned a community pharmacy, and I was not including any of them in the entrepreneur part.
Okay.
Even though I think we'd all consider them that those are business people and entrepreneurs, but they were not included in the 10 stories or the 12 participants, since some of the entrepreneurs were dual, male, female, friend, brother, sister, male, female.
Okay. Yeah, and in my course, when I taught entrepreneurship as elective in a college of pharmacy, I would say the majority of my students were male over female. And I don't know how we get more females excited about entrepreneurship. I personally love it, but I don't know, again, if it's a product of, being raised in a family full of entrepreneurs or how we get more women in, but we definitely need more women.
You know what else is troubling to me is I am the board liaison for the IPHO group, which is Industry Pharmacy Organization. Mm-hmm. And I think it's in 40 different chapters of the 149 schools of pharmacy. So I'm the board liaison there, and I meet with this group quite a bit, and they're really good kids. And there's totally disproportionate amount of males to females there. Way too many males. And I'm wondering also, why aren't more women signing up to get into IPHO, which could be a career in industry, but a great way of networking also. And I'm a little bit perplexed at that. I just don't know. I don't have an answer for it.
Well, I think the first step is always just acknowledging it, right? So I didn't mean to put you on the spot, George, but I definitely did want to ask about it.
Aaron, you can never, I would never feel like that was being put on the spot, because I think facts are friendly, and sometimes we don't do a good job. I just saw a statistic on STEM today where the percentage is so low of STEM graduates that are female, and there's a big push in it. And clearly, corporate America is trying to push it more. Society's trying to push it more. But the question then becomes, why aren't we getting more women into STEM fields? Yeah, I don't really have a good answer.
Yeah.
It's not working yet. Maybe it's going to take decades. I'm not sure.
Well, I hope not. But with that, George, Entrepreneurs in Pharmacy and Other Leaders is your new book. Where can people get their hands on a copy?
They can go to Amazon or Kindle, and they can either get a printed book there, but it's print on demand, so it's not really ideal. Or they can download a e-copy on Amazon or Kindle for $9.99.
And bulk purchases, like if somebody wants to use it as a textbook, do you have any suggestions there?
Yeah, that's a good question, because a friend of mine from the University of Pittsburgh wanted to bring in 10 for some students he was going to see, and he had trouble online ordering the 10. So I actually have to resolve that with the publishers right now. I'm wondering why they can't order multiples.
Okay.
I don't know if you've ever run into that with your book publishing, but I ran into it immediately out of the gate.
I usually keep a stash of my very own that I do bulk sales for. So.
Oh, and I have about 150 here at home right now, and because I need to ship 100 of them to the ASHP meeting in December.
Yeah.
I'm doing a book signing where I'm donating 100 books, and it's for the ASHP Foundation. So whatever they can raise, we're hoping to get 100 a book, and we'll raise $10,000 for the ASHP Foundation that day. And I think Cardinal's matching any gifts that week, so we could raise $20,000 for the ASHP meeting. But I also have to ship 100 books there.
That's outstanding. So you're is it mid-year? Are you going to be at mid-year?
Yeah, that's at the mid-year clinical meeting in Orlando.
Perfect.
So I'll be there signing books Monday and Tuesday at the foundation booth.
Well, we have tons of students here that listen to the podcast. So if you guys are going to mid-year, you want to definitely see if you can find George and get your hands on a copy of this book.
Sounds good.
So with that, George Zorich, thank you for being part of the Pharmacy Podcast and the Back to School RX mini-series.
Thank you, Erin.
All right, are you ready for our speed round?
Oh, I thought I was finished already. Okay, speed round, let's go.
All right, what books are you reading right now?
You know, I realized I read a lot of history, military, and war books. Part of it is my father was career military, but I'm currently reading Rumor of War. It's a Vietnam book. He had 3 tours over there. I had 4 cousins. I just missed being drafted, so I tend to be a military buff. So that's the one I'm reading right now.
Okay. What other podcasts are you listening to?
You mean other than Pharmacy Podcasts?
Of course.
I read, I'll listen to, during workouts, I'll listen to Pardon the Interruption, which is a sports one from ESPN with Tony Kornheiser, and then Laura Ingraham, which is politics.
And if you had one word to describe the U.S. healthcare system right now, what would that word be?
U.S. healthcare system.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's troubled right now, and expenses are just getting so far out of hand. The healthcare costs are going crazy, and when every drug is costing $75,000 to $150,000 per therapy or per treatment, it's unsustainable. And not enough people have transparency to what these things are costing, and I think it's unsustainable for society. And even things like insurance premiums. I mean, I'm a pre-Medicare, post-working person, so I have an individual policy. My Blue Cross Blue Shield of Illinois went from $6,600 a year in premiums to $26,000.
Wow.
And that includes a $5,200 deductible. So my wife and I, and thankfully, we each have 1 physician visit a year. So we're healthy, but we can't roll the dice and take a chance. So we pay the first $32,000 out of pocket. It's crazy.
Wow.
I mean, I've never seen anything so crazy in my life. But having said all that, Erin, with healthcare the way it is today, I think pharmacy has an opportunity to insert themselves in the middle of all this and be the group that helps solve some healthcare issues. But they have to put themselves right in the middle of it and solve problems. If they become a dispensing function, I think it lessens the profession and it hurts the profession long term.
And last but not least, George, what's the best career advice you ever received?
I think it's make decisions. So it sounds so simple, but in other words, don't procrastinate it. If you are in a chosen work, your field, and you know as well as anyone what the answer should be, don't hesitate. And I would say anyone can make a decision with 99% of the data points in, but can you make a decision and feel comfortable with 70% of the data in? And I hope you can. And to any pharmacist listening out there, I would say you have the skills and the education to make those decisions. Make them and be strong leaders going forward.
Well, with that, George Zorich, your new book, Entrepreneurs in Pharmacy and Other Leaders. I'm so excited to read it. I have my copy. I got it from my P.O. box last night. Thank you for being part of the Pharmacy Podcast.
Erin, thank you so much for what you do for pharmacy, and love your podcast. Thanks so much. Have a good night.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Back to School RX. We hope you enjoyed the show with George Zorich, author of the brand new book, Entrepreneurs in Pharmacy and Other Leaders. It's now available on Amazon.com. If you have questions during our mini-series, feel free to reach out to us at #BackToSchoolRX on Twitter and any other social media platforms. I'm looking for that hashtag out there. Give us your questions, and we hope to address them here in the mini-series. As well, please like us over at Facebook, as well on Twitter. Our handle is @PharmacyPodcast. My personal handle is @AaronLAlbert. And of course, you can find me at my website, AaronAlbert.com. Thanks for listening, and have a great day.